Marriage is a beautiful thing, and it's an institution that every part of society has come to accept and embrace. Amongst the different religion, we have people who believe in the institution of marriage. Now, today we're going to talk about the remedies and the compensation for breach of promise to marry. We've heard of situations where a man trains a lady in school, and after the lady leaves school, she comes up to say, um, "You're not my type." And the understanding of course they had was that the guy was going to train her in school, and when she leaves school she gets married to the guy. But when she leaves school eventually, she says, "Oh, you're not my type." Or you see a guy dating a girl for a long time, promises to get married to her, and all of a sudden says, "You know what, I've changed my mind." In situations like these, the law gives the jilted party the some reprieve. I mean, the right to bring an action and seek a remedy. But of course, you'll be asking me, what kind of remedy can someone who was promised marriage and then the promise was breached? What kind of remedy can that person really get? Will the court force the person who made the promise to eventually get married to him or to her? Well, we'll get to know in this discussion. Um, Now, in Nigeria, marriages are governed by legislations, including the Marriage Act, the Matrimonial Causes Act, and of course, customary law. Right? The Marriage Act provides for celebration of marriages, while the Matrimonial Causes Act makes provisions for matrimonial causes. So now, breach of promise to marry basically means someone has made a promise to marry another person and the person fails to keep that promise. Marriage is just like a contract where you have an offer. Hey, will you marry me? An acceptance. Yeah, I accept. I'll marry you. And of course, an intention. And of course, the consideration there of maybe love or whatever. Then the intention to create legal relations is that intention parties have between themselves to get married. Now, when a promise is made, it may just happen that one of them breaks that promise. That is where issue of breach of promise to marry, that's where it comes in. However, if someone breaches a promise to get married to another person, the person who is offended or the jilted party can go to court. But before you can succeed in an action for breach of promise to marry, you must prove two things, or basically there are two ingredients. The first one is that the other party made a promise to marry. You must prove to the court that there was actually a promise to marry. Now, this kind of promise is different from just hopeful expectations leading you on or casual suggestions. Some persons can just be catching cruise and say, "Hey, you're fine, my wife, I'll marry you." Or the person responds to your status, "Fine girl, now me go marry you last," and then you just take it as a proposal to marry. You're a joker, and if you go to court, the court will definitely throw your action in the judicial trash can. So it must not be a casual suggestion, right? It must be concrete and there must be a meeting of the minds between parties. The party making the promise must clearly show his intentions through words, actions, and conduct. So you must show that, and you, of course, must be able to show how that promise was made. Then the second one, you must show to the court or prove to the court that the person who made the promise reneged on the promise. So, in order to prove a breach of promise to marry, the aggrieved party must be able to show that the other party failed to fulfill his or her promise. Where there is a stipulated time for the fulfillment of the promise to marry, it must be fulfilled within such time. And where no time is stated, it must be fulfilled within a reasonable time. Okay, so you must prove that the person breached or the person has reneged on his promise to marry. And those are the things you show the court, and it's shown to court by way of evidence. Now, there's a case of Ezeina and Atta. The Supreme Court in that case clearly supported these two positions. In fact, the court in that case stated that the two ingredients to prove a case of breach of promise to marry is one, to show that there was actually a promise to marry, two, to also show that the party who promised reneged on the promise. Of course, there are two types of breach of promise to marry. One is non-performance, and then the other is anticipatory breach. The first one, which is non-performance, is where a date has been fixed for the marriage, but the other party refuses to honor such, or where there is a condition precedent for marriage to the other party, and then the other party fails to take steps to fulfill that condition precedent. The anticipatory one is where um, you know um, a party prior to the date fixed for the wedding cancels it, and or better still, decides to run away or get married to another person. You just see the flyer on WhatsApp status. Somebody you have been dating for 4 years wants to get married to another person. It's unfortunate. So you can take that person to court as long as you have proof and you can show that he promised and that he breached that promise. Now, when somebody takes you to court for breach of promise to marry, the remedy the person is intending to get is damages. That means you're going to compensate the person for the pain, the distress, the emotional torture, and all of that. And of course, the compensation it's in monetary form. The court will not give an order forcing you to marry the person. No, because the court will not force on an unwilling party, force a spouse on an unwilling party. Now, but there are defenses. If somebody takes you to court for breach of promise to marry, whether you're a male or a female, there are defenses. All right. Now, of course, these defenses will be filed in your processes, in your papers by your lawyers. But it's good you know that. Number one, if you can show to the court that the person you promised to marry actually deceived you, all right, actually deceived you. So for example, you go to a club, you go to a party, and you see a lady, she wears, what's it called, all of those things within, to make her body look enhanced. And by the time you get to know her, and because of that, for those who get married because of what they see, they just make a promise and say, oh, I'll get married to you, you're so beautiful. And then later you get to know that this person was just padded. If that kind of deceit is there, or there are lots of other deceits. If the innocent party discovers, for instance, that the person he or she promised to marry was originally of a different sex, you see someone like Bobrisky and then you promise to marry the person. If you can, and then Bobrisky takes you to court, you show the court, prove to the court that you were deceived by Bobrisky. You thought he was a lady and then you got to discover that he's a male. That defense will avail you. The other one is infidelity. If you can prove to the court that the reason why you called off the wedding is because the other party cheated or is cheating, that will also avail you. Illnesses and diseases, where a party is suffering from diseases, right? Um, that makes it impossible to marry, e.g., mental order, disorder. That can be a ground to cancel the marriage. All right. I hope this was helpful. Please click on the subscription button, like, and